well, it's natural to think like, oh, what if I fail? But then you can also be fearful of, oh, what if I don't try this now, right? There's that risk too, especially if you think the opportunity won't easily come as often. Then you want to think, right? Like, will I get a second chance to do this? I think that really pushed me into actually doing it and overcoming that fear, because the fear of not trying it at all, I think, outweighs the fear of failing.
I'm so excited to find out more today about your journey from being a software engineer and then changing careers to now developing your own game. So to start off, could you just tell our listeners a bit about your background, about your education, your previous work, and also what you're doing now?
So starting from my education, I got a bachelor's degree in computer science. After I graduated, I got my first and actually only job in the software industry as a software engineer. I worked in that company for almost 8 years, and after that I took a small break and went to Japan for 2 years. After that, that's when I started my indie game developer journey, and yeah, until now.
Cool. Let's talk a bit about your career change. That's what I really want to know more about. How was it like for you making that change from being a software engineer, working in a rather stable job, getting a paycheck, and then and then quitting and starting your own game? Like, how did you get to that decision? How long did it take you?
Yeah, it wasn't an easy decision that I can say for sure. And it actually took me quite a while to actually decide that yes, I'm gonna do this. The actual idea itself, like the time that I got the idea that, oh, maybe what I want to do is game development, that actually came pretty early. It's probably around 2 or 3 years before I actually quit my full-time job. So yeah, I took quite some time to think about it for sure.
What were your biggest concerns or maybe fears about making that leap? Why do you think it took you like quite a while before making that decision?
Right. I think I often heard the stories about people who are doing the similar thing about quitting their job and trying something new, where it feels more like as a big risk due to whether it's financial reasons or the new experience itself. But I guess for me, I think what made it hard about decision was that I was actually pretty content about my job at that time, and I was actually enjoying my work to some degree. So yeah, weighing the two options, I think that was not easy. I had to really consider like the trade-offs and the pros and cons, and like, oh, I feel like I'm doing well right now. Do I really want to quit the job and do this crazy indie game development thing and probably don't make any money? So yeah. Probably if I hated my job, that would make it a little bit more easier in making a decision.
You would have left earlier maybe?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't need that much time to think about it, right? Like, oh, I hate the job anyway, so... But considering that I was actually having a good time there, I think that made it a little bit harder.
What did you enjoy? Like, what were the aspects that you enjoyed about working in a company or, working like in a corporation?
I think there are definitely multiple aspects to that. One, I think to some degree I do enjoy programming itself. And I feel like the work I was doing there actually had a visible impact to some degree. I had a decent career progression at the time where you're climbing up the ladder, and it's like, I would say it was going relatively good. I think finally it's just a sort of sense of stability, I think, with the regular job. Yeah, stability and safety. Yeah, that said though, compared to what I'm doing now, the whole game project by myself, it's still a big difference, I would say. Even though I said I was making some amount of impact, but it's definitely nothing compared to like me just doing my own project where I'm responsible for everything.
So what was the final, let's say, like tipping point that made you decide, okay, let's go for it and let's like do that and not wait any longer?
Right. I think for me there wasn't actually any like big grand tipping point. Like as I mentioned earlier, like I spent a lot of time, probably 2 to 3 years, while still doing my full-time job, to really think about it and reassuring myself that what I'm doing is the right choice. So it's more really distributed over a period of time. Yeah, I think that's how I see it. There's not really one like defining moment or defining factor. It's just considering all various factors and doing a bunch of planning over like a long period of time.
You just said that, yeah, you were thinking about whether or not it's the right choice to make or not. Like, what were the things that were kind of on your mind during that time?
Probably the easiest thing would be financial consideration. I think I was in a decently good financial situation to do this. It was still a big factor that I took into consideration, and at the time I really want to make sure that I have enough savings so that I can do game development or try out game development without too much worry for a significant amount of time, right? Giving me some space and peace of mind, not worrying about money all the time while I'm working on my games. That will be one thing. I think the other thing is just sort of researching sort of what I will be doing exactly, or what I could be doing within game development itself. Because for a long time, like I know I want to try game development, but that's really still a very at that time I only had a very rough picture about what that actually entails and which direction I could actually go within game development, right? So having a better picture of what the possibilities are, like what's the earning potential, what kind of game could I possibly make, what the industry looks like now. Do I want to work by myself all the time, or do I want to make a team, or do I want to work for someone else? Just thinking about all that thing and like having a clear picture, I think really helps me be more confident in making the steps that I need to take.
Yeah, it's kind of a dilemma, right? Like there's so much uncertainty, things that you don't know, and you try to prepare yourself by thinking through everything, but in the end you kind of only really know how it is after you've been through it, right? After you've done it.
That's true. Yeah. In the end, you only know after you tried it. But
has it been at all like the way that you expected it to be? Like having those thoughts about, okay, what will I do later? How it will be like? Did it turn out to be how you expected it to be?
I think so far, at least, more or less, yes. I would say there are definitely a lot of things that I didn't thought about too deeply, or I didn't thought it would be like, oh, this thing turns out to be way more difficult or more important, or it takes more effort than I thought it would be. There are things like that here and there, but overall it's still within what I imagined. But I mean, I'm still within the journey, so I'll let you know
how it goes. When did you actually first had the idea of making a game? Like maybe not specifically this game where you're working on now, but just in general, like was it something that you had since you were a kid, like playing games and then wanting to make games, or is it something that you've recently discovered? Because I think many people are curious to find out, like, how do you actually know like what you really want to do, right?
I think it's probably when the time it started is exactly like you said. Like I grew up playing games as a kid, and it always fascinated me, and it's definitely a big part of my life, I would say. So I think to me, at least, that will be like the natural path to look at or to consider. The idea of game making itself, although like when I was a kid, oftentimes like I would create like sort of my own game, like role playing whatever with my classmates or with cousins, like making up our own game, like playing as, I don't know, warriors, or playing like we have kingdoms and stuff. But it became more concrete probably around, I don't know, I think it was like middle school or maybe high school. So I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but certain games, they come with these tools for modding. And modding is basically the idea that you can modify or tweak an existing game.
Oh.
So it's like you buy the game, right? And then it comes with certain tool set that allows you to actually modify the game in oftentimes quite drastic way that changes the nature of the game and even make a completely different game, right? So I definitely was interested and played around with those, and yeah, I think it definitely sparked my interest.
Do you think that you could have like made a game, or in general, can people make games without getting a degree in computer science or something related, or is it something that you can actually learn on your own and just like try making? I mean, like playing the guitar, right? You can you can study music, but you can also just like learn it by yourself, or I don't know, take courses or so.
Yeah, I think especially these days, right? I feel like oftentimes you can say you can almost learn anything by yourself these days, but as for game development, yeah, I think there's a lot of great resources out there. I mean, I think it would help if you have like a pillar you can hold on to. Like for me, it's computer science or software, or it doesn't matter. Like maybe you can have a background in art or something. Just that stepping stone to help you get in there, because just going from nothing would be, it's definitely possible, but definitely more challenging, right? Because then you have to like completely learn programming from scratch and then learn art from scratch, writing, blah blah blah. So it's nice to have something to start with, but yeah, you can totally learn by yourself.
That's good to know. Yeah, for anyone listening right now who wants to make games, and yeah, perhaps that could be a path, right? Let's talk a bit more about like the financial considerations, if you're comfortable talking about that.
Yeah.
Because right now you're living in Seattle, right? And everyone knows Seattle is a super expensive city. So how do you make it? Like how do you pay your bills? How can you keep doing your own thing? And yeah, how do the finances work? And what advice could you give to people who want to do the same thing, right? Do their own thing, but not relying on a steady income anymore.
Yeah, I think my advice would be to just plan and prepare. Get an estimate of like how much time you want to give yourself in trying to do the new thing. And maybe if possible, multiply that time by 2 or 3.
2 or 3.
And then figure out how much you need, right? To have a, I don't know, comfortable or enough budget to live somewhat comfortably. And for me at least, I think there could be different way to achieve this, but for me it was just having enough saved up. I do also have some passive incomes, not a whole lot, but it definitely helps, so I would encourage you to look at that too. Probably not something that takes too much of your time, right? Because you want to focus on your new thing.
Right.
Right. Something that's low effort. And I think there's a lot of idea out there these days. Like you can find a lot of ideas about getting passive income ranging from low amount to high amount. But yeah, for me it's a little bit of passive income, but the primary source for me would be savings. Yeah.
Savings. How many months or how many years of living expenses you should ideally have saved up for before leaving your job? I mean, some people who are in like the FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early movement, they save up so much that they don't have to work ever again, right? And focus on whatever they want to do. But I think I'm a bit like in the other school who believes that you don't necessarily have to wait that long, because that can take you 15 years or depending on how much you make, right? Like what do you think is like the sweet spot? Like how much should you have saved up before giving yourself the chance to try out something and just leaving your job?
I think it also depends on your situation. In general, I think I would follow the formula I mentioned earlier, where you estimate how much time you need. I guess that depends on what you're doing exactly, right? It can range from a year to 5 years, depending whether you're doing game development or you're writing a book or whatever. And I guess then you need to consider whether you have a sort of a backup plan or not if that doesn't work out, right? And for me, I guess I'm lucky enough to be in a situation where I think my backup plan is pretty easy. It's going back to a regular software job. So in that case, I think I don't need to like save up for like my entire life and then do it. I could just save up enough, and then I guess if that didn't work out, like I have my exit plan.
That's a good plan to have, because sometimes people make it like a yes or no choice, right? As in, okay, leave your job and do your own thing and never ever go back again. Whereas actually you can do it like you said right now, just now, right? You can leave your job and do your thing, and you can always go back again later on. Although, of course, it depends on the industry. It might be easier or harder to get back into. And yeah, what do you think about like the software industry? Like, how easy is it there to like leave and then come back again after a few years? Is it common?
Yeah, I think for the software industry, at least, it's not that hard. Yeah.
It's not like, where have you been? Now you want to come back?
Right,
Sorry.
right. I think as software engineering is a lot about just like there's, even though there's a lot of new technology popping out here and there and new programming language, blah, 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 but like the core knowledge and understanding remains the same, and it uses also sort of the same way of thinking. So sort of once you learn it, you can learn like all like the fluff on top of it. And yeah, let's say you want to go back to getting a full-time job in software, I would imagine like you can just study up on whatever latest thing is there, or even like make a small project demonstrating that you can keep up with the new stuff. Yeah, I thought about it sometimes, and I think even like you don't even have to go, depending on your situation, you don't have to completely go back to doing full-time 9 to 5. You can even consider, I don't know, maybe do it part-time while you're still doing your new thing, right? Or maybe freelancing, or yeah.
But even though you knew that one day, I mean, you had this backup plan and you could go back again at some point, regardless of whether you were successful or not, right? With your game, that option is there. Were you still scared, like when you left your job? And yeah, if you were, like, how scared were you?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a scary decision, because I think I see it not just as a career change sort of, but just a life change in general. Like, for example, there's a lot of getting used to new routines, and like I don't have this fixed structure that I orientate my life around, right? Where people usually who has 9 to 5 jobs, right? I think they have to build their life sort of around it, right? Weekends are for rest. You work 9 to 5. And after work you do, I don't know, whatever. Whereas working by yourself, doing your own thing, you need to structure it yourself and navigate it by yourself. So it was definitely scary. And of course there's also the the fear of failing. I think that's probably always the big thing, fear to fail.
What is the success rate like approximately for indie game developers? Like, how many people make it, if there's like a definition for making it at all? Like, what would be success, and how would you define failure?
I think, yeah, it depends on person to person for sure how you define success, right? I would say a reasonable way to define it is, I don't know, you make a game and you can sell it enough for you to get by, I would imagine. But I'm sure people have various definition of success, right? I mean, you can not earn a lot of money but have a great game, and I would definitely count that as a success as well to some degree. And then of course there's a 0.0001% or whatever of the super successful ones, right? And that's the story we often heard. And it will be nice to achieve that, but especially in the indie game industry, I don't think it's a reasonable target to aim for. And it's definitely, I think, not the best industry to be in financially wise. I think that's also what made it hard for me, because I'm going from like a career that made me good income to one that's like very shaky. And yeah, if your goal is to make a lot of money, I don't do indie game development.
Be a software engineer, right?
Be a software engineer.
Yeah. I think fear of failure is something that holds many people, or most people, back from really going after what they really want, what's important to them, right? Like being afraid to fail. How did you in the end overcome that feeling? Because I can't imagine like it's it's a very big concern thinking about, oh, what if this doesn't work? What if I fail? Like, how did you get over that feeling and just like decided to let's just do it anyway? And
right. I think for me, probably there are two things that helped me get over that. The first is related to my previous point about being prepared. Do your research, get as much information as possible about what you're doing exactly. Like you said, you don't know for sure what you're getting into until you're actually doing it, but I do think a lot of research and being specific about what you're doing can help you prepare and give you a better chance at success. I guess this is the more practical sort of thing I did. And the second thing is, I guess, more about the mindset. Well, it's natural to think like, oh, what if I fail? But then there's also, you can also be fearful of, oh, what if I don't try this now, right? There's that risk too. Especially if you think the opportunity won't easily come as often, then you want to think, right? Like, will I get a second chance to do this? And I think that really pushed me into actually doing it and overcoming that fear, because the fear of not trying it at all, I think, outweighs the fear of failing.
why do you think that there might like not be an opportunity to do it again? I mean, it kind of implies that it's better to try it out earlier rather than later in a way, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, yeah, it really depends on your situation, but there's all sort of factors to consider, right? Like, I don't know, where you are at life, or just financially. If, like, I don't know, you have savings now, but who knows what will happen in the future. Health could be a consideration too. Say, I don't know, you're feeling good and fit, and I don't know, you're at your prime or whatever, but things can change, right? So, yeah. I mean, of course, it can also change for the better, but you never know. So I think, like, given the opportunity, if you're thinking it from the, oh, what's the worst case scenario, then it's probably, oh, then the chance might not come again, right? So if there's a chance, like, should at least think of it carefully.
Yeah, that's a good insight, because there are many people, I also have many friends who are like still in banking, and those who are on the like safer side, in quotes, they think that a better approach is to save up even more and wait even longer until perhaps they're in their 50s or 60s and then do whatever they want, right? But yeah, like after hearing what you said just now, it kind of makes sense. If you wait too long, I mean, nothing in life is certain, right? Whether or not you will still have that money, because I don't know, you could lose it for one or the other reason, right? I mean, simply just consuming it. Yeah. Or you don't know how your health will be, whether or not you'll have enough energy at that point or not. So yeah, there are a lot of things that speak for why not do it now as early as possible. I mean, as long as your finances and everything else allows it, right? Yeah. One thing I also wanted to know is, did you have a kind of a role model, or I don't know, someone who was successful in indie game development that you looked up to, or that kind of like inspired you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah. There are definitely a number of them, and I admire them a lot. One of them is, what was his name? He goes by an alias Concerned Ape. I think it's Eric Barone. He's the creator of Stardew Valley. I think it's one of the more well-known indie game, and it was really successful. And he worked on the game almost all by himself completely, and I think it took him like 4 or 5 years to finish it. But yeah, he did it all by himself, and it turns out to be an amazing game. A lot of people really like it. He really inspired me too, for sure. I think he had to learn a lot of things, because I believe like when he started, his background was also just software, or I think maybe he even just graduated from computer science. So he had to learn a lot, because game has a lot of parts in it, right? Not just programming, like how to make art, how to do writing, and everything.
Wow, that's pretty long, right? 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Not knowing whether you'll succeed or not, but he made it in the end. And yeah, if others have done it, if they can do it, why not you, right?
Right.
But how much of that do you think is luck, and how much of that is actually a result of his work and dedication to it? not giving up?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, I think a lot of it is definitely not giving up and hard work for sure. But I feel like in the indie game industry, you definitely need luck as well, some amount, because there are so many games out there now. Like every single day, like so many new games are popping out. So definitely there's a little bit of luck involved. But yeah, I think you do need to have that hard work mentality and persistence and just not giving up in order to succeed.
How do you think your previous career and your studies, computer science, and working as a software engineer, how has that equipped you, like in terms of skills for making this game? Like how much do the skills overlap with what you're doing now?
Programming itself is definitely the biggest help to actually start working on games. Of course, there are other elements of game development, right? Not just programming. There's art, audio, writing, game design, etc., etc. But I guess for this project, I intentionally choose a project that's not too heavy on, let's say, art or audio, which I don't have much experience with, but the game is more relies more on, or is more heavy on, like programming. So that's where I can utilize actually my experience that I gained from my previous jobs and from my study. A lot of other things like art, for example, yeah, I just have to learn it by myself, which is both tough, but at the same time it's really fun. Like I recently picked up pixel art. So it's like this retro style of art.
I like that.
Like Mario Bros, for example. Yeah. So I started learning that and actually apply it to my game. So yeah, there's a lot new to learn, but I was still able to utilize experience, like my programming experience. And in fact, like one other thing, like that's not so obvious that I was able to use that I learned from my previous job was more sort of management organizational skill.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that really helped me like structure my project and kind of figure out how I want to break up the work, sort of how do I want to do the scheduling, estimation, and so on and so forth. So it wasn't very apparent at first, but I think it really helps a lot. Yeah,
it seems there are really a lot of transferable skills, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That is what sometimes people changing careers are maybe a bit too afraid about. They think that they really have to start from scratch again, whereas oftentimes like there are so many especially soft skills or management skills, right, that you can take over and use. So nothing really goes to waste, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
So how do you feel that your life is now? Like, how is it different now that you're working by yourself? I imagine you're working at home like every day. On your own, like compared to working at a company with colleagues. How did it change your life overall?
I think the working by myself, I'm not too bothered with that change. Although I do also enjoy working with other people, I don't mind that much working by myself. And this is not saying that I will continuously only work by myself in game development. Like I do have thoughts about working with other people as well eventually. But yeah, as of now, it doesn't bother me at all. And at times I actually enjoy it. Probably related to my personality too. Sometimes I like to just focus, have control of everything and don't be bothered. I think that part works in my favor. Of course, the downside is like less social interaction or feedback or just someone to talk to about like whatever problems you encounter during work. Other than that, I think the big change is definitely just like lifestyle wise, where you have to be strict with yourself because there's no one to hold you accountable if you wake up at noon, right? Where before is, you have a 9 a.m. meeting. If you didn't wake up, then like everyone knows your boss will call on you. And like, there's an automatic sense of accountability.
So now you have to be your own boss.
Now, that definitely takes time to get used to. And I think even now I'm still working on it, but I mean, it's one of the main things I needed to change, and I think it's a good change.
Yeah. Do you have any regrets, or would you do anything differently if you look back on your journey of like leaving your job and starting this, would you have done anything differently?
Would I have done anything?
Or did everything turn out like the way you expected it to be?
I wouldn't say it turns out exactly as I expected to be. I guess I'm just glad nothing has gone too wrong so far yet. I mean, I'm still in the middle of it, but I'm not sure. I'm thinking whether I could have like planned even more or prepare even more to know what I'll be doing more precisely, exactly within game development, right? Even though I did like a lot of research and roughly have an idea what I want to do, like, oh, maybe I want to do this game of this size and then maybe I'll do it for this long. Maybe if I have a more specific idea or plan, because before this project I already worked on another project that turns out way too big in scope, so I decided to put it aside and then work on this one, which is smaller. So maybe I could have avoided that. I don't know. Yeah, just putting more thoughts into it and knowing exactly what I'm gonna do, I think might help.
But in the end, you can also only prepare that much, right? Like,
right, you can only prepare that much.
Started it, you don't really know exactly what kind of challenge you'll encounter and how you'll deal with it. Sometimes you just have to
I think
try it,
the
right?
key is finding that balance, right? Researching enough, but not too much that it paralyzes you.
Right.
Definitely
And
often leaning more towards like researching or preparing too much. So
yeah. I think that's what a lot of people struggle with too. People who want to leave their job and just do their own thing, start their own business. Yeah, they plan, but sometimes they overthink too. And then in the end, like you said, they get into analysis paralysis and end up not doing anything. So what, do you have any advice that you could give to listeners who maybe are planning something similar, like leaving their job, starting something new? Like what would your top advice be for them?
Probably preparation. Prepare well, both financially and mentally as well. Like I said earlier, knowing more precisely what you're doing. If your plan is just, I'm gonna start a new business, then maybe you need to think more, right? Break it down further. Of course, this is an extreme example, but I think having a more precise idea, I think, would help you also prepare. And I think just planning for having a plan B, what you're gonna do if it doesn't work, right? I think that is worth considering or thinking about at the very least, I would say, because it's not just about what if it actually happens. I think it's also sort of a peace of mind while you're doing this new thing, right? Because if you're doing the new thing while having to think about all the other stressful thing that might happen, I think maybe some people could thrive on it, but I'm definitely not the type of it. The ease of mind for me is very important, so I can completely focus on the game project.
Yeah, that's very, very solid advice, I think. Before we end this, one last question. Where can people find you on Instagram or so, and check out your work?
I actually just recently created an Instagram and Twitter account, so you can find the latest update of any of my work there. I guess you can also try contact me there. And I think my handle is @It's Lu Sien, so ITSLUSIEN.
I'll put that in the descriptions.
Cool.
Okay, thank you so much, Lu Sien, and all the best with your game. All the best
thank
and
you.
success with it.
Pleasure to be here.
And talk to you again soon.
Talk again.